software engineer, front end. I work with Kiosk Digital Services. And Kiosk Digital Services is in the same space as companies like Twiga. I think you've heard of Twiga, Reja Reja, Soccer Watch. We are all in the same space of FMCG, or fast moving goods. Day-to-day primary role is working on Angular front ends. Previously, I was a full stack dev, but I have sort of migrated to work more on front end related tasks and solutions. Previous background was PHP, MySQL. I think most guys pretty much started there. If you did maybe dev work probably some 5 years back or so, most people probably started with PHP and MySQL and the likes. So that was the place I started. So with time, I picked up Angular and more so Ionic for mobile apps. So that is my day-to-day job at Kiosk, dealing with Angular front ends. So for today, we are going to be looking at or rather monorepos at a high level. We may not go to the nitty-gritties, but hope at the end of this, you will have a good understanding, or rather a high-level understanding of what are monorepos, tools that you can, tooling that you can use around monorepos. And this will also excite you so that you can probably take a deeper dive and start exploring monorepos and toolings that you can be able to use within, or rather with monorepos. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and let me know when you see my screen. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So today we shall be speaking about monorepos and what they are, what you can do with them, how they can help you, and tooling that you can use around monorepos. Monorepos have been there for quite a while, but most of us in our programming journey or our dev journeys, essentially we are not introduced to monorepos. What we get introduced to is, we can call them some kind of monolith apps which everything lives together. It's not essentially organized as a workspace that is in sense following a certain pattern. It becomes something that you just put your code together. I remember my project in campus, everything was just packaged into one app, whether it's the backend calls, whether it's the services, whether it's the DB access scripts, everything just bundled into one app and tightly coupled. And I think in programming terms is what most people will call spaghetti code. That was some years back. Now I'm wiser, so I do not write spaghetti code anymore. So, but it's all in a growth path or timeline. So the monorepo will be essentially used most times by guys who are doing version control. If you want to get a grip on what you are developing, where you are, the changes that you are doing. So most people will tend to use monorepos, or rather the pattern that's being promoted is monorepos. And monorepo essentially means just a single repository that holds multiple applications in a development strategy. So many companies will employ this at different levels in different patterns, but as monorepos have continued to evolve, we have seen tooling that has come up to help ease development using monorepos. And if we take a step back, most of us, this is where we started. We started with monoliths, and slowly by slowly, based on what you are exposed to, you move to a multi-repo whereby you are able to apportion your working code into projects, and you split it up. And then down the line, the multi-repo has its own gives and takes, and managing code, being able to version the code, code sharing, tracking changes. Um, there are so many things that go with a multi-repo. And then from multi-repo came in the monorepo. Monorepo is something that has been greatly or extensively used by companies like Google and many other big companies like Facebook. They promote repo, monorepo, and for Google, I was reading that their monorepo is so huge, and it contains most of the code of the products that we see from day to day or experience or use from day to day. So, like personally for my journey, this was the journey. Started with a monolith as I was learning how to code, put everything in one box, change something, and then everything blows up in your face. You have no idea what broke what and what killed the other or poisoned the other. Then slowly I started learning patterns, started splitting my projects into front end, into back end, into different things. And then finally, as in my dev journey, I learned about monorepos, how you can put different applications in the same repo, do things like code sharing and the likes. So it's all in a dev's journey as you learn these patterns and as you grow in your dev career. So the good and the bad about the monorepos. We have sort like preempted some of these things. Uh, the good with the monorepos, you will see ease of code reuse because you have many apps sitting in the same repo. You're able to build libraries, you're able to build components that you can share. And when I speak largely of monorepos, my bias here is towards Angular primarily because we are talking about an Angular context, but the monorepo can be extended to other frameworks like React, Nest.js, Express. You can be able to extend it to other applications. So in the context of Angular here, we are thinking, or rather of our talk here, we are thinking in the context of Angular. So we will find ease of code reuse, simplified dependency management. This is when we are talking about NPM modules. You will be able to have a global package JSON that you can use to manage your NPM modules and avoid issues that mostly come up with things like peer dependency or a certain application depending on a certain version or a certain group that is doing a certain portion of the app using certain a specific version, and then in another portion of the app you require a certain version, so you are able to unify your dependencies. And then we have atomic commits. This will help promote small commits whereby you do not lump multiple features in one commit, so it becomes easy to trace back and see what happened at this level. And with the atomic commits, you can be able to like revert changes without necessarily affecting many things except the feature or the fix that was being implemented. The other things will be refactoring, because when you have version control, it will be much easier to trace what has been happening. You can be able to see refactoring mostly will deal with technical debt that you're trying to eliminate at most times. So you will be able to see the history of the application as it is growing. You will be able to change code so that you can be able to promote reuse. You can stop, or rather you can kill things like high coupling. You can be able to eliminate things like what happens spaghetti code and things like that. So it will help promote refactoring and using best patterns. The other thing is cross-team collaboration. in this age where we have things like microservices, and microservices has become the word of the day. Whether it's micro front ends or micro services for the back end, there is cross-team collaboration. Think of an instance whereby you're working in a team that's dealing with a Spring app or a Nest.js application, an Express application, React application, Angular application, maybe a Vue.js application. All these are different frameworks that are being utilized. So it will be easy to have cross-team collaboration. Each team has visibility on what the other team is doing. So it promotes team collaboration, and every person in the team is in the visibility of what other person is doing. When we come to loss of version information, this is specifically in the realm of monorepos. So one thing that people experience is loss of version information, not per se in terms of when you're thinking of GitHub and the likes, but it is easy to lose traction of what version is what in what application. So these are some things that can get muddled up if you have a very big team, or if you have many applications that you're handling in one monorepo. The other problem with monorepos is no project access control. Now, with project access control, let's say you have an app which is a React app, or you have a couple of Angular apps that exist in the same repo. To some degree, you would want to control like what libraries or what features or what components certain apps can be able to import and use inside of themselves. Or there are certain features or components that are restricted to a certain Angular app. So when you move forward to now tooling that helps you to manage monorepos, these are some of the things now you will be able to access. But in a pure monorepo that has got no tooling, these are some of the things you will experience. Apps can be able to import components or utility libraries and things like that without any access control. They can be able to see everything, which could become a bit catastrophic if something imports something that it doesn't need or it's not supposed to see. Another thing is scalability. With monorepos, if you're not careful, you might find yourself in a huge code base that you cannot be able to control. So you will face scalability issues. There will be questions: do we need to break this out? Do we need to retain this code? Backward compatibility. There will be so many issues that you need to consider as you're moving stuff around, as you're adding stuff around into your monorepo. You have to think about how your monorepo grows. And with all this in mind and many other things can quite easily get messy. Somebody could change some code which kills everyone else's app, and you have no idea why something is not building, why something is not deploying. So many things can go wrong with monorepos. Now, with some of these things that are there, the advantages and the bad things. Now, this is where we see the entry of tools like Nx. Nx is a tool that tries to compensate or rather deal with some of these disadvantages or issues that are experienced when the development strategy here is using a monorepo. So before we move on to take a look at Nx, any questions so far? Or we are good, we can go on?
I think we're good. I think we can go on. Or is there any question?
All right.
All good.
Yeah,
all
you can
good.
go on. Yeah.
All right. So with the outlook of some of these issues that devs who are facing day to day when utilizing monorepos, came in Nx. Nx is built by a company called Narwhal. The primary founders, one of the guys is called Sav Keen, the other guy is called, I think, Jeff Cross, and all these guys are former Google employees. So when we say monorepos, they understand monorepo from the ground up. They have a good understanding of what happens, the in and outs. So they built this tool called Nx to ease the dev journey for, or rather to try and eliminate pain that devs were facing when they were using monorepos. So, and they have built up Nx as a CLI tool that gels well with Angular, with React, with Next.js, Nest, Express. So you will be able to use these JS frameworks, generate code, and Nx is able to decorate the CLIs for these applications, and you will be able to use the same CLI commands that you use for Angular, for React, and you call these commands, or rather CLI commands, using Nx CLI. So behind the scenes, you can still, like, for example, in Angular, you can be able to do ng if you are inside in your Nx monorepo, and ng will run from the Nx CLI. So, and you can still be able to do Nx to generate a component, to generate other artifacts that are related to the Angular, Next.js, Express, all this. So the Nx CLI, we can call it like it's the icing on the cake, improving some of these things that devs are experiencing as pains for these CLIs. So Nx comes and tries to make things much smoother and give devs a better experience when working with these frameworks. So for you to be able to use Nx, you will need to install the Nx CLI. Further down the road, we shall look at how you can add Nx into, or rather how you can add Nx into your ecosystem, and how you can run some of the Nx commands to create Angular workspace inside an Nx monorepo and the likes. It will be primarily nothing new. It's what you're used to, except that now you're doing it in a different CLI. You are executing different commands, but primarily doing the same thing. So now let's do a bit of background on Nx. So one of the things that we looked back with monorepos is enforcing one package JSON to become a single source of truth. Nx strongly promotes this pattern whereby you just have one base JSON package that is used to control all the packages or the dependencies that you have in your monorepo. So it becomes easy to control the versions of node modules that everyone is using in the app, so that you do not have a version clash where somebody is trying to use this and somebody else wants to use this. So it's able to bring a middle ground whereby you use the same version of an NPM module, where you are able to craft your CLI or rather your NPM scripts. You have unification, so that you don't have somebody trying to install. Probably when you think of NPM modules, you can also think of CVEs or vulnerabilities. Somebody has installed a package that is no longer maintained. So there is that unification. The entire application is in one step when it comes to certain aspects like NPM modules and what you have. So all these inconsistencies, all these things, you are able to control them using the setup in Nx. The other aspect of Nx, while it is providing a structure, while frameworks, will provide you with a structure for building applications. So Nx will try to, or rather Nx brings in plugins that help to automate adding different frameworks into one monorepo. That is why in Nx you will be able to have things like a React app, you will be able to have an Angular app in the same repo, you will be able to use a storybook in the same repo. So Nx addresses all of these things. It is able to bring in its plugin ecosystem. You can execute commands, you add Angular to your monorepo, add React to your monorepo, add storybook to your monorepo, just with simple commands. You don't have to worry about configs. Nx will automate the base configs for you, and happily you go away coding. So, and most of the time you will find these base configurations work out of the box for most people, unless you need to tweak or do changes as per what probably you would want to see in your apps. So stepping back to this, I've just remembered something. When you think about a single source of truth, this is where you also have your things like the linting files. When you have your commits, you will be able to do the Husky. You will be able to configure your Husky so that you check your pre-commit hooks. So there are many things that you will be able to strongly enforce so that the entire monorepo or all the applications follow a certain pattern. We've talked about plugins, so you will have plugins for Angular, for React, for Storybook. All these help you so that you can be able to effectively manage your monorepo, so that you can, if you need to add Express into the monorepo, you just need to pull in the Nx plugin for Express, and happily you go away, you start carving out applications that are built using Express. And you can add your full stack apps. There are commands that you can be able to add your full stack app at one go using the plugins. So all of this is done using the schematics that Nx is able to bring in into your monorepo. At the same time, also remember, if you're able to write your own schematics, you can also bring them in so that you use them alongside the Nx schematics. So that when I say schematics, I mean you can be able to write your own scripts that help you to generate your own stuff. Like, for example, if you want to, you can create your own schematics that help you to generate libraries or utility files that you need, or you are consistently or constantly need to generate. And the other word we can use for these is boilerplate code. You can be able to generate your boilerplate code. And the same way, like when we do ng component, then we pass off other attributes or other options, and then we generate a component. All that is done using a schematic, which is able to generate that boilerplate. So you can be able to do all of that for yourself if you are at that level. Write your own schematics, and you can add them into Nx, into your Nx monorepo. The common use cases, we will find that mostly nowadays, most organizations, I believe even for those here in their place of work, you will find you're using multiple application stacks to in your ecosystem. You will use Angular, you will use React, probably some others are using Kotlin, Go, Nest.js, Express, Vue. So Nx will help you manage all of this, and you can benefit from things like sharing web components. As we spoke before, you can share things like authentication libraries, and you can share things like where you have API gateways, your apps can be able to share the same application. So there are the options of what you can share within the application, as long as it is shareable within a safe context. Then the Nx monorepo will make that painless. You will be able to build components. If it's an Angular app, for example, you could have like a navbar that is configurable. You could have like a search filter, which can be configured. You can be able to share this component across many UIs. If it's a sidebar, you can be able to share your sidebar across many other UIs. You can be able to create a microservice which is specifically targeting the sidebar, and you can share it in multiple applications. So the things that you can do here are endless. You can create your own pipes that you can share across the app. You can create your own custom components that you can share across the app. So there are endless things that you can be able to use and share and do with the Nx Monorepo. So this makes it quite easy and painless. And remember, you also have access control. So with Nx, you will be able to bring in restriction. Remember, one of the disadvantages of the monorepo without tooling like Nx is access control. Now, when you come to Nx, you will be able to be very much explicit that this component can only be accessed by these apps. This library can only be imported by this app. This component is specifically for this app and no one else. So you are able to define access. You can be very granular with who is able to access what. That is in terms of apps. Which app is able to see what and can use what. So that kind of project access control is very important so that you don't get into a messy situation whereby an app is trying to use or import a library that it's not supposed to. The other place, or rather the other thing that we see with Nx as a tooling for monorepos, it will provide you with an integrated experience, dev experience. We've already seen we have the plugins, and currently I think the Nx works very well with VS Code. You will be able to add Nx and you will be able to access all these schematics and tooling that is available in Nx inside of VS Code with ease. The other editor that I find people quite use a lot is IntelliJ. I think the plugin for IntelliJ is not yet out, and if it is, probably it is in trial mode or something. So, but the fully supported editor is VS Code. You will be able to do all of these Nx commands to generate in terms of Angular. Remember, we are talking about an Angular context here. You will be able to generate component modules. You will be able to generate libraries. You will be able to generate feature components once you create your Nx monorepo. Down the road, we'll take a peek and see that. So with the schematics, you have the code generation or the boilerplates, and you can be able to generate these things. With Nx, you will also be able to enforce best practices, as we spoke about pre-commit hooks, ESLint, and the likes. You will be able to enforce them inside your developer environments. You will also be able to connect with your CI/CD pipelines, and deployment will be done with ease. Nx takes care of this. With Nx, you will see things like dependency graphs. We will look at what is a dependency graph. So when you come to CI/CD pipelines, it will be much easier to deal with this out of the box, and Nx will help you do that. We have visualizations of the workspace. We'll also see a bit of that. And we also have the Nx dev kit. As we spoke, you can be able to write your own schematics and bring them into Nx for you to do your own stuff. So now, when it comes to things like visualizations and CI/CD pipeline, one of the things that is something that makes the dev journey painless is the build and testing of what is affected. Like for example, there we can see that if you change something, you can be able to see what path, or rather, this is to break down, this is a dependency graph. Now, Nx shows you a dependency graph. The dependency graph will be, this is the app, and the app depends on these modules, it depends on this, it is calling this and that, you will be able to see a dependency graph that tells you everything that depends on something else. It will show you the path. Now, for example, let's say you have an Angular app. Yeah, you have your authentication, you have your homepage, you have, let's say, when you talk of an e-commerce site, you have your product list page, you have your category list page, you have your product detail page, you have your checkout, you have your history, which shows you your order details. It will show a graph, or rather a tree, which shows you what calls what and at what point it calls what. And you can even be granular. You can be able to go to those specific modules, and you will see good documentation of what is inside those modules, like the code, the name of the functions, all of that. So it promotes also good internal documentation of the app, whereby you document your functions, what this function needs as parameters, what it returns if it has a return type or a return value. So it helps promote such good practices. So with this dependency graph, like for example, what we can see here, when we come to building and testing, you can be able to see which path is affected. If we go back to the example that I gave of an Angular app, let's say, for example, you changed the product detail screen or the product detail component, you will see a path that marks everything that depends on that component. It will be in a different color, as we can see here in this dependency graph, that the features, or rather the components that are marked in red, it means some changes happened and these components are affected. So imagine where you have a huge application, or rather a huge monorepo, which has got 10 applications. So instead of the CI/CD pipeline rebuilding all the 50 applications, the CI/CD pipeline will only rebuild the affected parts. So with time, building and deploying becomes much faster, because you don't have to build everything inside the monorepo. You only build the affected parts. With this build and test what is affected, there is also something that we call Nx caching. Nx caching is a paid feature for Nx, whereby your teams can be able to create snapshots of what you have in your timeline. At this point, this is what we built and deployed. That can be cached in the Nx cloud, so that the person who comes next doesn't have to repeat the entire process again. They just are able to pull in the cache and they can continue with ease. Where something that probably to build and to test would have taken like 30 or 40 minutes, they will get that cache, download it, and happily they start coding away. So that is another big advantage of using Nx in the monorepo. So makes the CI/CD build and test pipeline much painless. You can use the Nx caching, which makes it easy to get the snapshot or the point in timeline where the app is, without having to necessarily do everything. You can be able to get a snapshot of the app as is at the current point. And also, when we come to documentation, we can think of this dependency graph again as a point of documentation, whereby teams that need to look at the entire app in a high-level view, they can be able to see what depends on what calls what. They can be able to see that architecture of the app at one glance. So this dependency graph at that point also becomes like a documentation tool. So all of this is done using Nx commands, and like you can see there, you can be able to pass other options that will do these. If it is tests, you can be able to do them in parallel. That is, all different tests are running at the same time, or you can be able to do them in serial. So it depends with what you will promote as your practice or the settings that you want in your Nx. So Nx in itself has got so many features that will make the dev experience painless. And most of the time, most guys, this is where most devs will be stuck. The build pipeline, whereby something takes like 30 minutes or so to build because it's a huge app, or you are a new dev, you are joining a new team, and probably you have joined a team in the middle of a huge release, and you're supposed to offer support, and you have no idea what calls what or what depends on what, and then you release to production, things go haywire, there is a bomb somewhere, and you're supposed to join the team and do support. So some of these things like the dependency graph will give you a good overview of what is happening. You can use with the NX cache, you will be able to pull the project into your PC and run it much faster rather than having to wait for probably a 40-50 minute build while you need to support a production issue. So these things will make it easy when you think of probably versioning, you having one single source of truth when we think of the NPM package. So all of these things will contribute to making your life easy. Nx, when we think of tests, it will also support tooling like Cypress, Jest. So it will be upon you to configure your cup of tea when it comes to tests. So there are a million and one things that you will be able to explore Nx when you're thinking of a monorepo. We have talked about the dependency diagram. So as if I reiterate, it will help you to see, or rather have an idea of how your workspace looks like. And it will help you to go and be as granular as much as possible. You can be able to follow certain paths and routes, or rather within or branches within your dependency graph, and be able to see how different portions of the app relate to each other. So it's a great tooling also if you want to like create a good internal documentation of the entire app or workspace that can be utilized by engineers, both who are maintaining the app and anyone who is newly joining the app. The team. All right. So now there are a ton of things that we can talk about NX in itself. I believe we cannot exhaust all of them at one go. So I would encourage you to go to nx.dev and explore different things that you can do with NX. You can start with the basics, and as you advance in your expertise, you can be able to do so many other things like having your own custom configurations for the build pipelines, enforcing things like ESLint, pre-commit hooks, being able to configure your build pipelines. The moment you push to a repo in GitHub, you trigger tests, you trigger build, you trigger deploy, because within this, you can be able to even be very granular if it is, and probably you're working with an Angular code base where you have to deploy we can say hybrid app. So you have an Ionic app and you have an Angular web app, and you need to deploy, you also probably have an Electron app that you need to deploy. You can be able to configure all of this inside NX, so that once your tests are done, you can build and you deploy your app to Google Play Store. You deploy your app to your cloud service, whether Google, whether AWS. You deploy your Electron desktop app wherever you want to deploy it. So all of these things can be done using NX. So NX will sit on top of your monorepo and make the dev experience much more enjoyable. The things that you used to do manually, now you're able to automate them. You can use NX. You don't need to be in a team of 50 people. You can use it even in a team of 2. You can use it even in a team of 1 as you're doing your multiple apps. Probably you're doing your own side project where you need to build a mobile app. You need to have a desktop UI, admin UI, mobile app for your users. You need to have probably an Express.js backend. You can be able to bring all this into your monorepo and use NX on top of that, and you are good to go, and you're up, and you have a good, or rather a better developer experience. So, questions so far? Spoken too much before we dive into the next portion.
Yeah, I think I have a question.
Yes, Wayne.
I think when you talk about the dependencies, right? The dependency graph, like, does it mean like all dependencies that are current in the application? Like, for example, let's say you have, let's say, a third-party library that is, I don't know, dependent on Angular 13, and all that. Like, do you mean that kind of dependency, or do you mean like that kind of dependency injection whereby, like, if you have a service, if you have a component that is dependent on a service, it shows you that? Or what kind of dependencies is shown in the dependency, is shown in the dependency graph?
All right. So in the dependency graph, we are talking about modules, components. We are talking about features that exist in your app and how they relate to each other. You will be able to see your authentication components. Let's say in your, let's go back to our e-commerce example. Your auth UI portion or component depends on the auth service. You will see now in the graph, you will see an arrow or an indicator that this component depends on this. So that is what you will see in the dependency graph. You will be able to see this component depends on this service, it depends on this utility, it depends on this lib. You will see all of that interaction so that you can be able to understand. So the dependency graph also will help when we come to the affected parts of the application. If you change something, like, for example, if you change the auth service, the authentication service, and there are other components that depend on it, probably the UI, the login component depends on auth. The profile component depends on auth, probably to get some info about that specific user. So if you change something in auth, you will see different color indicators that will show you that the login component and the profile component depend on service, and service has changed. So Nx, when doing the build and the test pipeline, it will understand I will need to retest auth. I will need to retest login and profile, since they depend on service and service has changed. But anything else which does not depend on service will be a skip, because nothing has changed, nor has its dependencies changed. So the test path, or rather the time taken to test, or rather run your unit tests, maybe your E2E will be much shorter. So for the other portion, when the dependency graph is basically about that. But if you think of NPM modules, you will be able to enforce a single source of truth using the package JSON file, whereby you have a global package JSON file that all the apps are using, so that they can be able to use the same version of the node module, or a certain minor version. So that is what you will be able to do with the package JSON file. But the dependency graph, you will be looking at the features, the components that are in your app, the libs that are in your app. How do they interact with each other? Have I answered your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other question?
Hello, Alex.
Yes.
I had a question about projects and libraries. So now in our where I work now, when we create a library, it just comes out like shows that libs. But then when I started creating my own monorepos, usually the folders usually just create like projects. But then if it seems to be working the same way. So my question was, is there a difference between the two? that the way, or it's just that it's a naming convention for dependent on the which NX version?
Okay, from my experience, when I have used NX, the projects will, or rather, you can think of projects as your app. So for example, looking at this screen that we have there, you can see on the screen, on the code fragments that we have there, we have UI, common, we have dev feature, doc viewer. Those are different projects or apps that exist within the Nx Monorepo. And then libs will, we will see a sample of the folder structure of how the monorepo is, the Nx monorepo is structured in terms of folder structure or hierarchy. And when you create a lib, you are supposed to pass a specific command, or you are supposed to invoke a specific schematic telling Nx that I want to be, or rather I want to create a library, so that it will understand what you want to create is a library, and it will be put inside a library. So you will be very specific. If you're creating an app, you will run a CLI command to create an app. If you want to create a library, you tag, or rather you decorate your CLI command with options that tell Nx I want to do a library here, so that you can be able to differentiate, like this is an app and this is a library. So because commonly you will see your Nx monorepo split into different portions, but the most common portions will always be apps. This is where your Angular app will reside. Inside the apps folder is where your React app will be, where your Nest JS app will be, where your Express app will be. When you come to the libs, this is where your auth service will sit. This is where your state management will sit. This is where your shared components will sit under feature components, and then you will have the common UI components. So under the lib, you will have different portions, or rather different elements or fragments of your code that you want to share with, or rather share inside the apps. Does that answer your question?
Okay, it's kind of partly answers it. So I wasn't really talking about NX in full, because when we generate, or when I've tried to generate a library using just ng but not without NX in Angular, it creates it on the a folder that says projects, and then now I can add different apps on that on the same project. Or does that qualify as a monorepo on its own, or that's just me messing around?
Now, Angular has got something that you call an Angular workspace. An Angular workspace also emulates a kind of a monorepo, but now it has got no tooling like what we have here with Nx. You do not have all these features. So with the Angular workspace, you will be back to the common, to what we looked at before, which is a monorepo without the tooling of Nx. Because inside your monorepo, as you're saying, you will be able to have your libraries, you will be able to have your shared code, you will have the portion which is your apps. So essentially, it's a monorepo. That's an Angular workspace. You can also have an NPM workspace. So all these are monorepos, but now we are looking at monorepo, but now in terms, or rather, where we have Nx doing all the heavy lifting for us and making everything beautiful for us, so that you don't have to wonder where is this, why is this here. It's able to segregate and separate all these concerns for ease of management. So remember, we talked about things can get messy. This is one of the things that Nx was trying to fix, so that you don't have everything being everywhere. Probably a dev today comes and creates another folder and calls it libs. Somebody else comes and calls another folder common, and all of these are living in the same workspace. So Nx will try to enforce some kind of specific pattern, or rather we can say in what we say in the dev terms, Nx is opinionated. This is how they want you to do things. So with that, this is how we want you to do things. it helps to make things not messy. All right. So
All right.
whatever you have is an Angular workspace, which is a monorepo. We are good now?
Thank you. Yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. All right. So we can go on.
You can go on. Yeah.
All right. So to install Nx, Nx can be simply installed with a simple npm command, install-gnx-g for global, and that's it. As simple as that. And now you have all the power of Nx at your fingertips. Sorry, I have a bad encoder here.
No problem.
So, yeah, she already knows what to do with the keyboard, despite not knowing what the keyboard is doing. She knows how to work with the keyboard. So now, getting Nx into your ecosystem, once you have npm set up, you have your Angular, or rather your Node.js dev environment set up, whether this is in Linux, in Windows, in whatever platform you are in, npm install Nx. You can use yarn for those who prefer yarn add Nx, and happily there you are, and you start creating your monorepos in a second or in a few minutes once you set up your Nx. And once you install Nx and you start creating your Nx monorepos, we talked about a common folder structure. So this is what you're likely to see. You're likely to see your apps. This is where your applications will reside, whether it's Angular, React, Express, all this. They will reside inside the apps folder. You have libs folder. This is where your common shared code will live, components, utilities, and whatnots. All this will sit in your lib folder. And then you have tooling, where you have your tooling. If you write your own schematics and the likes, they will live inside your tools folder. And then you have other JSON settings files. You have the NX JSON, you have the package JSON, which is the single source of truth, we can call it so, when it comes to node modules. And you have your tsconfig base file, which can be extended by other apps so that you have a base foundation for your tsconfig files. So all of these JSON files that you see here can be extended. And if you want to get granular enough, you can get into a situation whereby you have an app which needs a certain specific node, or rather npm package. So within the apps folder, you can be able to have another package.json file, which will be very specific to a certain node module that is required by a certain app, if need be. So you can be able to get down to such a level of granularity. So you have a global package JSON, and if need be, you can have another package JSON inside your apps folder, which will be for some very, very specific node modules that you need inside that app. And you do not want, probably you have something that requires a specific version of a certain npm module, and you already have a global version of that module. So you can be able to, you can be specific so that you don't pollute the rest of the environments with conflicting npm package versions. So this will be the basic folder structure when you execute your nx command to create an Nx monorepo. That is, whether you run it using an Angular schematic or React or any other, this will always be the basic that you will get. Depending on how you pass options to the Nx CLI, you can get different folders created, but at a base level, this is what you get. So now we have Nx installed into our ecosystem. We have an idea of what the base folder structure, basic folder structure looks like. sorry. So when you have now in the context of Angular, back to Angular and NX, as we said, the NX schematics help, or rather will take care of configurations out of the box for you. They will figure out things like Webpack, E2E, unit test runners. All these things will be done out of the box for you, so you don't have to worry about how to configure them. Unlike when you are in a pure monorepo, you have to think about how to package your app, what to include, how to run your E2E tests, how to run your unit tests. You have to think about linting. So NX will take care of this for you out of the box. And once you have your NX CLI set up in your dev environment, to run, or rather to create an NX app, sorry, not an NX app, to create an Nx Monorepo. And let's say we want to pass an Angular app as the schematic, or rather we want to use the Angular schematic. You just run, as you can see there, npx create Nx workspace. So now that CLI command, create Nx workspace, will be available to you the moment you install the Nx CLI, or you add it in, you add Nx into your dev environment. Now, npm, you can replace npm with npx. You will you use npx when you do not need to install nx into your local environments. So what npx will do is that it will pull the nx CLI on the fly from the internet and create the workspace for you. So if you use npx, you do not need to install nx itself. But if you install nx, you replace your npx call with npm, and you are able to, or rather you have access to your Nx Monorepo with your Angular app. Now, once you do, you run this command, what you will have inside your apps folder is your Angular app. You will, in the creation process, you will be asked for the name, the usuals, the licensing, the what you prefer, SCSS, CSS, SAS, things like that as you're setting up your Angular app. So there's you will not be running away from what you know about doing, or rather creating an Angular app. But here now you're adding other tooling that makes this journey painless. So in the behind the curtains, when you create, when you use your preset, or rather you pass the option that you preset, your preset is equal to Angular, Nx will understand that you need to run ng commands. So behind the curtains, it will run the ng commands for you, so that you can be able to set up your Angular app. It's as easy as that. For React, it will be, the preset will be React. For some, there may be who want to probably create a monorepo with a full stack JS apps. It will be as easy as just saying, create an Nx workspace, and then you pass the preset that you want, an Angular and Nest application. So you have your front end as Angular and you have your back end as Nest. You can also pass Express, that you will have your front end as Angular and your back end as Express. It can be React and this. So the same commands that you're used to, but now you're bringing in something to help with your tuning. So we did say that you can also do React apps. You can do React Native. You can do purely an Angular app. You can replace there where we have React Native, you can replace it with Nest. You do a Nest app. You can replace it with Foo. You can replace it with Express. So all this will get those schematics, and those schematics for Nx will run those commands that you know for Nx, for Express, for Angular, for React Native. All of these behind the curtains are executing those CLI commands that you're already used to. So there is nothing new, except now that you have this tooling, which is making everything beautiful for you. It's as easy as that. So when you explore that, you'll find there's so many other things that you can be able to do with NX. It's hard to cover them in one session, but this at least gives you an appetizer or an idea of what you can do, things that you probably have wondered, how can I do this? Or what would help me, or rather what would help my work make it easier and make the experience less painful. So NX is doing all these things for you, and it's able to help you manage your monorepo, whereby you're able to use your libs. You can be able to define your libs. You can define, you add your apps. You're able to have your feature libraries, whereby you have smart UI components for specific business cases, and then you can have UI libraries for presentational components. Like, for example, if you have a pop-up that just displays info, it doesn't care what this info is. Maybe it's a notification component, which will always tell the user, oh, something new has, we have a new version of this app. You can have that in the UI library, and then you can pass your data to it through binding. In your libs, you will do tokens that you want to be shared across the app. So there are many things that you will be able to do in a much, I can say, much better controlled environment, that you have a grip of what is happening. When you think of your state management, you will have your data access libraries, where you are able to split your, probably you can split your code that does side effects. You can separate your code that is able to fetch data from the backend. So you will be able to create all these utilities that are interacting with the backend in a library. You can be able to have this sit in one place, whereby it is easy to navigate. So everyone understands this library contains this. If this is not working, this is where you find it. It will help promote the patterns whereby you are able to split things into modules, and each module performs a specific function or a feature. So you're able to break down your app into small granular components that are much easy to maintain. So there are many things that, as you explore a monorepo, an NX monorepo, that make your dev journey much enjoyable. And remember, for Angular here, when you're using NX, so you can say like NX build. Behind the curtains, NX build is just executing ng build. If you say, sometimes you can also use ng build, that is what it will do. So if you use NX sub, remember NX is for the NX monorepo. So if you say NX sub, behind the curtains, it will be calling ng sub, but there are other things, decorators that are put on top of these commands that will make the process much quicker, much more enjoyable. So there are other things that you will enjoy when you're using the NX tooling on top of your framework CLI. So the same commands that you call in your framework, now you call them via NX. And NX understands that if I am saying NX serve, it would have been the same as saying ng serve. So the same commands, but now you are using the NX CLI. So you will not be deviating from what you know. It will only be a change of the commands a bit. You will be tweaking a bit of what you know, so that you can enjoy other features that CLI, or rather that NX is able to bring into your CLI. So now I think at such a point when you have some kind of understanding, you will be able to now see how NX can benefit you if you are building, or rather how you can bring it into your ecosystem to make things much easier to work with, maintain, whereby you can be able to segregate and separate concerns, it will be easy to help you move away from a monolith kind of structure, and you will be able to now build even things like JS, microservices, if we may call them, and micro front ends. So all of this now becomes much easier to manage and control in a defined environment. So that is NX in a nutshell, and how easy you can start utilizing NX without needing to worry about so much that you need to know about NX. From personal experience, I also thought that NX was, when I had the term monorepo and I joined a team that was maintaining multiple apps in one single monorepo. They were talking about smart UIs, they were talking about dump components, they were talking about state management, all of that in the space of a monorepo. I was like, okay, what is going on here? What is this animal called monorepo? But the moment I got to work with the monorepo, started with the simple commands, had the understanding or the perspective that NX is just decorating the CLI commands that I already know in Angular and doing other things behind the curtains to make my work much easier. I was able to work with NX, or rather enjoy working with NX seamlessly. So I believe, or for those who haven't used NX before, I believe it will be the same kind of experience. So don't be afraid. It's what you already know. It's only that now. And I hope the Subaru guys and the Nissan guys here will not hate on me. It's like having your Subaru Legacy now. You have promoted it to be an STI. You have put in all the works, and voila, you're able to do things much faster. Yes, you will pay the price of spending much more at the fuel pump, but the results will be there for you to see. So you can decide to go with a plain old Daisy, or you can decide to go with the one who is pimped and pulling all the bells and whistles. So that's it for NX in a nutshell.
That will definitely rile up people. And, yeah, anyway, if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask.
So it's not as sometimes we hear these terms being passed around in stand-ups, in meetups, and you're like, what are monorepos? What is NX? The beauty of these things is it's what you already know. It's only that it has other things on top, but basic foundations, it's what you and I already know and are working with from day to day. It's only now it's being made better. Questions?
Yeah.
Questions, anyone?
Yeah, I have a
Sorry.
question. No worries.
All right.
So how, in your personal experience, like when it comes to like, because now like we have a monorepo and like you have different projects, how easy or how hard is it to if it's unit testing or end-to-end testing when using monorepos? How hard or how easy is it?
Still, NX will rely on what you already know. If it's writing unit tests will remain to be the same unit tests. E2E tests will still remain to be the same E2E tests. Now, when you create an NX monorepo, NX will essentially create for you two project folders. One is the app, and the other one is an end-to-end tests folder. So it will utilize the knowledge that you have for writing E2E tests will still be very much applicable here. It's only remember that NX is decorating what you already know. So running unit tests will still be the same. You will have your npm scripts in your package JSON file that will run your unit tests. And then you also have your CI/CD pipeline that you can, if it is the YAML files, you can write your YAML files and say, these are the NPM commands when we are doing the build or we are doing the tests. These are the same, these are the NPM commands that I want you to pre-run before you build this and you deploy it. So there is nothing much that is changing. The same way you know how to write unit tests is how you will still write your unit tests. And then you will have, for the CI pipeline, you will have your YAML file. For your local dev environments, you will have the NPM scripts that you call. And then the same way that you would call your test, NPM run test. Now you will decorate your CLI command with NX. Instead of npm, now you will be running nx, and then you can pass other options to test what you want to do. If you're running multiple tests, you can be able to run multiple tests in parallel. You can decide to run this test because this test has dependencies on something else which must be done before this. So it is your call on how you you craft your npm commands and what options you pass. So there's nothing that is changing dramatically when you introduce NX.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so
and in your probably in what probably you've seen out here, how fast are companies adapting to the monorepos? Because I think having a couple of conversation with recruiters or just people out here in tech, especially Angular, NX is rapidly becoming very popular, and people advising others to, like, get to learn more about it. Like, in your own words, do you think it's something that is here to stay, or is it something that's just going to be like a bubble that's going to burst in some few years to come?
With most companies or most places that are doing development adopting microservices and micro frontends, and JS frameworks have become very popular in terms of front-end apps. And you have a mix of front-end apps. If we think of Angular, you will be able to do a desktop app, you can do a web app, and you can do a mobile app. Now, all these three apps can actually share the same components, and they can share the same libs, they can share the same data management strategy in terms of state management. So they will employ an Nx monorepo will be very beneficial. In my experience, most international companies are already employing Nx monorepos. They may not per se use Nx in itself. There are other versions, or rather there are other monorepo tooling options available out there. We have Lena. I can think of Lena off the top of my head, but you will, if you Google, you will find there are other tooling options for monorepos. But Nx is a bit popular for most companies. So yes, it is a good, it's good to have knowledge on Nx, how it works, what you can do with it, because you will find most companies that are using Angular lean towards Nx monorepos. So, and it's not technology that is likely to go away that easy, because given the fact this is an idea that is being promoted by big companies like Twitter, Facebook, Google, so it is not likely to go away that fast. So it is here to stay. Not sure for how long, but in our current development strategies, it is something good to have in your profile. Kenyan companies are also migrating from monoliths to micro service and micro front-end architecture. So when these start coming in, you will see a change of strategy, and these companies are slowly adopting monorepos. So if you can arm yourself with this knowledge, if you can be able to tell black from blue, and you have an idea of how a monorepo works and how things are gelling together, you will be a step ahead of somebody who has no idea what is a monorepo. Also in the same breath, have an idea of some cloud service, whether it's Google, whether it's AWS, have an idea of Docker containers, have an idea of Kubernetes. You may not have the hands-on experience of how to create or build Docker containers, what is Kubernetes, how to do, to create Kubernetes pods, but have an idea of what is Kubernetes, what does it do. You may not know how to do that on code, but have an idea of what all these things do. That way you will be a step ahead of other people who have no idea, because these are the technologies that Kenyan companies are fast adopting, because now we need to match the traction for international companies. And if you are a dev who is working locally and maybe at some point you would want to be hired by an international company, Docker, Kubernetes is the talk of the day. How you can containers, running your apps in containers, micro front-end, micro apps, microservices, and all of this most of the time will be managed within a monorepo. Sorry about the background.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think my questions have been well answered. Anyone else who has a question?
Alex, I also
Yes.
had another question.
Mhm.
In terms of well, I talk about monorepos and how they are being. I wanted to get your opinion on how we can use if using them, if using monorepos versus using submodules. Or submodules to implement well the different libraries in different areas.
So now, if I get your drift, is that you mean, for example, if you have an Angular app, let's just say a pure Angular app, you've done your, and then you go inside your apps folder, and then you have probably you have your dashboard, you have your home, you have your product, you have your product details, and then inside of that you have something like, let's say we call it common, and then inside common you have the common services and the likes. Is that what you mean?
Okay, let's take it like this. If from the products detail, from the e-commerce site, so maybe you have a submodule that only handles the UI elements, then you have a submodule that only handles the state element, submodule that only handles the auth elements. So all these are in different repositories. So I was wondering if how scalable is that compared to monorepos? Getting your opinion on which one is better.
Okay, that in itself, I can say it's a path towards using a monorepo, because if I abstract what you're saying is that you have let's say something that deals with product entirely sitting in its own repo. It has all its nitty-gritties inside of itself, and anyone else who needs to speak with these components, they will either import them or they will speak to them via an API. So in my opinion, you in such kind of a scenario, number one thing that I see happening a lot is a lot of code duplication. Like let's say for the product, you would need a header, you would need a footer, you would need some common elements that are shared in the menus. So you will see lots of code repetition. And that kind of code repetition means some portions of your ecosystem can be left behind if certain places change and some places lag behind. So you will always have a version mismatch. That could be one of the problems you are likely to face. Number one, the other thing is you are not able to, it will not be easy to enforce like the same NPM modules or other NPM packages across everything at one place. Linting will also be fragmented. So most of the time, the strategies or that rather the benefits that you can be able to enjoy or being able to have a single source of truth are lost in this scenario. So my take would be if you can be able to migrate your code into a monorepo, you will enjoy more benefits than each feature being singled out to sit on its own and have others import it or speak to each other via an API. It will make your dev journey much enjoyable if you have them within a controllable monorepo.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That actually makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Any comments?
Sorry.
Anyone else a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Any comments? Wayne, do you have a comment?
No. I think I really like this session because it really covered some of the most basic stuff when it comes to monorepos, and we didn't do like, okay, going straight into like, okay, let's create our first workspace, but then it was more of like really getting to understand what the monorepo is all about and how it's going to benefit you in your project, whether it's a personal project or at work. And who knows, like this could be a key winning point for you as the developer to even suggest it to your company and talk about it. And it's like, okay, what benefits does it have? You know, this means like you'd be getting ahead of everyone else in terms of like, you know, building stuff, using some of the most latest technologies, and you might even become like the expert when it comes to monorepos at your workplace. So I really like the basics that have been laid down in this session. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think let me add something onto that, Wayne. Remember, NX here depends on already what you know. If you think of like as we saw, we have the libs, which has got your feature components, which are smart components. You have your presentational components. You have your services that are libs as are utilities. These libs will be exported by a module. The same way that you have app in your Angular app, you have modules that are probably like, let's say, for example, you have a shared module which has got your Angular material components, that is the icons, the mat dialog, all these, you export them via inside the shared module. The same knowledge that you have is what NX will depend on. So if you create your libs will also be exported via a module. So you will have the import section and you will have the export section. You will also be able to import and export components. And when you go to your component that depends on something, if it is a service, the same way that we do it at the top of the file there, import, and then you destructure what you need from that module, and then you say from the same knowledge that you already have is what NX will rely on. So don't worry that if you build a lib in NX, you have no idea how to import it. The same knowledge that you have in Angular is what you use. There are some of us probably who have experienced something we call aliasing. Aliasing is whereby, like, let's say you have a component which is 5 folders deep inside a certain path. You can be able to use your JSON config file to create an alias path where you have seen already, we have it in Angular, where we say at Angular/core. That is aliasing. It is defined. If you go, as Adi was encouraging us last time, explore the Angular code, you will find this kind of aliasing, and it is something that you can do easily yourself. You just need to define it in your TS config files, and you can be able to say at lib slash, and the dependency injection will understand you want to import this from libs. You can be able to do all that aliasing, so that the same way we have at Angular slash common at rxjs slash operators, what you already know in Nx. Sorry, what you already know for your Angular dev environment. You're only decorating it with Nx commands. So hapa, there is nothing new. As I had alluded, you have a Subaru Impreza here. Now you're converting it into an STI. For Nissan CG, watasema you're converting it now to a Nissan Infinity or something. So you already know these things that Nx is doing. You already know them. So don't be afraid. You can jump into the pool, and you will be surprised. You get to do things off the ground. So even if you go suggest this to your manager and he tells you, okay, create for us a proof of concept and demo to us in the next 2-3 days, you already have 90% knowledge of how to use Nx. You just need to now have in your mind that I'm taking my Angular CLI commands and I'm decorating them with Nx to bring other enjoyable features on top of my Angular CLI commands. As simple as that. So
Awesome.
for some of us, we may not need even to have a technical session whereby we start saying, this is how you create a component in a library. You already know the Angular CLI commands. You will find it very easy to use Nx. It's easy.
Okay. So for me, I think in my place of work, we use Nx already. So it was nice of you to explain more about it. I think I've understood it better compared to how I understood it before. But nimefloat tu ni hapo kwa magari, lakini sawa.
Alright, hii ni kama kujaribu ukaange nyama plain. Hiyo ni your plain Angular app, and then ukaange nyama iko na roiko, iko na tudania. Which one is going to be more tasty?
And the dania, of course.
Yes. So now, when you add your Angular app, your plain dry fry nyama, and then uongeze dania and the likes, that's when you're topping it up with an accent. Ugali inateremka haraka haraka bila shida.
Yeah, so so I think since there are no questions, and wow, this session has gone for long, but we appreciate you, Alex. We appreciate you've really explained, and I admire your passion. You've gone really deep into this topic, and I hope to get it the way as you do, hopefully one day. So thank you so much. Yeah,
You're welcome.
and yes, I think now we can end the session. Unless there's anything someone wants to say.
So for Twitter,
Or where can people reach out to? Oh, Martin wanted to speak. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a request.
so
Sorry. If Alex
Sorry,
can
Martin,
share
can you?
the slides, I have a request. If it's possible that Alex can share the slides.
I will definitely share with Wayne and Linda and the Angular Kenya core team, and then they can share the slides with the rest of our members.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And if you could please tell people where they could find you on Twitter, on LinkedIn.
On
That be
Twitter,
good
you
as
will
well.
find me. Yeah, it's Muturi Alex on Twitter. You will also find me on LinkedIn. Just a sec, let me get you. Some of these things, sorry, I don't memorize them. I think it's the bias of knowing that you can save these sessions in your browser, so you really don't. So on LinkedIn, you will find me Alex-Muturi. That is hyphen. Yes, you will find me on LinkedIn. And then on LinkedIn, you will see I have when I have the time, I write a few articles here and there. So from my LinkedIn, you will be able to go to my Medium account where I write once in a while. Hopefully, I will start writing consistently, but I share my knowledge and whatever I have experience on Medium.
Okay, cool. So
yeah,
that's the end of our session. So guys,